Page 11. I said, "Hi, Mom, I'm home. I'm missing 2 flowers," my mother said. I don't know how she noticed that 2 flowers were missing from her silver bowl, because there were at least a dozen of them left. But sure enough, when I checked, I saw 2 stems with nothing on them. "Don't look at me, Mom," I said. "What would I do with 2 measly flowers?" So we both looked at Fudge. "Did you take Mommy's pretty flowers?" my mother asked him. "No take," Fudge said, and he was chewing on something. "What's in your mouth?" my mother asked. Fudge didn't answer. "Show Mommy." "No, show," Fudge said. "Oh, yes." My mother picked him up, and forced his mouth open. She fished out a rose petal. "What did you do with Mommy's flowers?" She raised her voice. She was really getting upset. Fudge laughed. "Tell Mommy." "Yum," Fudge said. "Yummy, yum, yum." "Oh, no," my mother cried, rushing to the telephone. She called Dr. Cone. She told him that Fudge ate 2 flowers. Dr. Cone must have asked what kind, because my mother said roses, I think, but I can't be sure. One might have been a daisy. There was a long pause while my mother listened to whatever Dr. Cone had to say. Then Mom said, "Thank you, Dr. Cone." She hung up. "No more flowers," she told Fudge. "You understand?" "No more," Fudge repeated. "No more, no more, no more." My mother gave him a spoonful of peppermint-flavored medicine, the kind I take when I have stomach pains. Then she carried Fudge off to have his bath. "Leave it to my brother to eat flowers. I wonder how they tasted. Maybe they're delicious and I don't know it, because I'd never tasted one, I thought. I decided to find out. I picked 1 petal from a pink rose. I put it in my mouth and tried to chew it up, but I couldn't do it. It tasted awful. I spit it out in the garbage. Well, at least now I knew I wasn't missing anything great. Fudge ate his supper in the kitchen before our company arrived. While he was eating, I heard my mother remind him, "Fudge is going to be a good boy tonight. Very good for Daddy's friends." "Good," Fudge said. "Good boy." "That's right," my mother told him. I changed and scrubbed up while Fudge finished his supper. I was going to eat with the company. Being 9 has its advantages. My mother was all dressed up by the time my father got home with the Yarbys. You'll never have guessed that Mom spent most of the day in the kitchen. You'd almost have never guessed that Fudge ate 2 flowers. He was feeling fine. He even smelled nice, like baby powder. Mrs. Yarby picked him up right away. I knew she would. She looked like a grandma. That type always made a big deal out of Fudge. She walked into the living room, cuddling him, and then she sat him down on the sofa and bounced Fudge around on her lap. "Isn't he the cutest little boy?" Mrs. Yarby said. "I just love babies." She gave him a big kiss on the top of the head. I kept waiting for someone to tell her Fudge was no baby, but no one did. My father carried the Yarby suitcases into Fudge's room. When he came back, and he introduced me to our company. "This is our older son, Peter," he said to the Yarbys. "I'm 9 and in the 4th grade," I told him. How do, Peter?" Mr. Yarby said. Mr. Yarby gave me a nod. She was still busy with Fudge. "I have a surprise for this dear little boy," she said. "It's in my suitcase. Should I go get it?" "Yes," Fudge shouted. "Go get it! Go get it!" Mrs. Yarby laughed as if it had been the best joke she had ever heard. "I'll be right back," she told Fudge. She put him down and ran off to get our suitcase. She came back carrying a present tied up with a ribbon. "Ooh!" Fudge cried, opening his wide eyes. "Goody!" He clapped his hands. Mrs. Yarby helped him unwrap his surprise, and it was a wind-up train that made a lot of noise. Every time it bumped into something, it turned around and went the other way. Fudge liked it a lot. He likes everything that's noisy. I said, "That's a nice train." Mrs. Yarby turned to me. "Oh, I have something for you, too. Peter," I reminded her. "My name is Peter." "Yes. Well, I'll go get it." Mrs. Yarby left the room again, and this time she came back with a flat package. It was wrapped up, too. Red ribbon and all. She handed it to me, and Fudge stopped playing with his train long enough to come over and see what I got. I took off the paper very carefully in case my mother wanted to save it. And also to show Miss Yarby that I'm a lot more careful about things than my brother. I'm not sure she noticed. My present turned out to be a big picture dictionary, the kind I liked when I was about 4 years old. My old one is in Fudge's bookcase now. I don't know much about big boy toys, Mrs. Yarby said, so the lady in the store said a nice book would be a good idea. A nice book would have been a good idea, I thought, but a dictionary? That's for babies. I had my own regular dictionary since I was 8, but I knew I had to be polite, so I said, thank you very much. It's just what I've always wanted. I'm so glad, Miss Yarby said, and she let out a long sigh and sat back on the sofa. My father offered the Yarbys a drink. Good idea, Mr. Yarby said. What will it be? My father asked. What'll it be? Mr. Yarby repeated, laughing. What do you think, Hatcher? It'll be Juicio. That's all we ever drink. Good for your health, Mr. Yarby pounded his chest. Of course, my father said, like he knew all along. Juicio for everyone, my father told my mother. She went in the kitchen to get it. While my father and Mr. Yarby was discussing Juicio, Fudge disappeared, just as my mother served everyone a glass of Mr. Yarby's favorite drink. He came back. He was carrying a book, my old worn-out picture dictionary, the same as the one that Yarby's just got me. See, Fudge said, climbing up in Mrs. Yarby. See, book. I wanted to vanish. I think my mother and father did too. See, book. Now Fudge held it over his head. I can use another one, I explained. I really can. This one is falling apart. I tried to laugh. It's returnable, Mrs. Yarby said. It's silly to keep if you already have one. She sounded insulted, like it was my fault she brought me something I'd already had. Mine, Fudge said. He closed the book and held it tight against his chest. Mine. It's the thought that counts, my mother said. It was so nice of you to think of our boys. Then she turned to Fudge. Put the book away now, Fudgy. Isn't Fudgy's bedtime? My father hinted. Oh, yes, I think it is, my mother said, scooping him up, saying good night, Fudge. Good night, Fudgy, my brother said, waving at us. Fudge was supposed to fall asleep before we sat down to dinner. But just in case, my mother put a million little toys in his crib to keep him busy. I don't know who my mother thought she was fooling, because we all know that Fudge can climb out of the crib any time he wants to. He stayed away until we were in the middle of our roast beef. Then he came in carrying Dribble's bowl. He walked right up to Miss Yarby. He thought she was a new friend. See? He said, holding Dribble under her nose. See, Dribble? Mrs. Yarby shrieked, Ooh, I can't stand reptiles. Get that thing away from me. Fudge looked disappointed, so she showed Dribble to Mr. Yarby. See? He said. Hatcher. Mr. Yarby boomed. Make him get that thing out of here. I wonder why Mr. Yarby called my father Hatcher. Didn't he know his first name was Warren? And I didn't like the way Mr. and Mrs. Yarby both called Dribble a thing. I jumped up. Give him to me, I told Fudge. I took Dribble in his bowl and marched into my room. I inspected my turtle all over. He seemed all right. I didn't want to make a big scene in front of our company, but I was mad. I mean, really mad. The kid that knows he's not allowed to touch my turtle. Peter, my father called out, come and finish your dinner. When I got back to the table, I heard Mrs. Yarby say, it must be interesting to have children. We never had any ourselves. But if we did, Mr. Yarby told me, we'd teach them some manners. I'm a firm believer in old-fashioned good manners. So are we, Howard, my father said in a weak voice. I thought Mr. Yarby had a lot of nerve to hint that we had no manners. Didn't I pretend to like their dumb old picture book? If it isn't good manners, then I don't know what is. My mother excused herself and carried Fudge back to my room. I guess she put him into his crib again, and I hope she told him to keep his hands off my things. We didn't hear from him again until dessert. Just as my mother was pouring the coffee, he ran in wearing my rubber gorilla mask from last Halloween. It's a very real-looking mask. I guess that's why Mrs. Yarby screamed so loud. If she hadn't made such noise, my mother probably wouldn't have spilled the coffee all over the floor. My father grabbed Fudge and pulled the gorilla mask off him. That's not funny, Fudge, he said. Funny, Fudge laughed. Funny, Fudgy. Yes, sir, Hatcher, Mr. Yarby said. Old-fashioned manners. By that time, I'm sure my father was sorry the Yarbys weren't staying in a hotel. I finally got to bed at 10, and Fudge was in his crib slurping away. I thought I'd never fall asleep, but I guess I did. I woke up once, then Fudge started babbling. He said, boo, baboo, ha, ha, shh. Whatever that means. I didn't even get scared. I whispered, shut up. And he did. Early the next morning, I felt something funny on my arm. At first, I didn't wake up. I just felt this little tickle. I thought it was part of my dream. But then I had the funny feeling somebody was staring at me, so I opened my eyes. Fudge was standing over me, and Dribble was crawling around on my arm. I guess Fudge could tell I was about ready to kill him, because he bent down and kissed me. That's what he does when my mother's angry at him. He thinks nobody can resist when he makes himself so lovable. And a lot of times, it works with my mother. But not with me. I jumped up, put Dribble back in his bowl, and smacked Fudge on his backside hard, and he hollered. My father came running into my room, and he was still in his pajamas. He whispered, "What's going on in here?" I pointed at Fudge, and he pointed at me. My father picked up my brother and carried him off. "Go back to sleep, Peter," he said. "It's only 6 o'clock in the morning." I fell asleep for another hour and then woke up to an awful noise. It was Fudge playing with his new train. It woke everybody, including the Yarbys, but this time there was nobody that they could blame. They were the ones who gave Fudge the train in the first place. Breakfast was a very quiet affair. Nobody had much to say. Mr. Yarby drank 2 glasses of Juicio. Then he told my father that he and Miss Yarby had their suitcases packed. They were leaving for a hotel as soon as breakfast was over. My father said he understood that the apartment was too small for so many people. My mother didn't say anything. When the Yarbys went into Fudge's bedroom to pick up their suitcase, his voice boomed, "Hatcher!" My father ran towards the bedroom. My mother and Miss Yarby followed him. I followed them. When we got there, we saw Fudge sitting on the Yarby suitcase. He had decorated it with 100 green stamps, the kind my mother gets on the supermarket. "See," Fudge said, "see, pretty?" He laughed. No one else did. He licked the last green stamp and stuck it right in the middle of the suitcase. "All gone," Fudge sang, holding up his hands. It took my mother half an hour to peel all the trading stamps and clean up the Yarby suitcase. The next week, my father came home from the office and collected all the cans of Juicio in our house. He dumped them in the garbage. My mother felt bad that my father had lost such an important account, but my father told her not to worry about Juicio wasn't selling very well at the stores. No one seemed to like the combination of oranges, grapefruits, pineapple, pears, and bananas. "You know, Dad," I said, "I only drink Juicio to be polite. I really hated it." "You know something funny, Peter?" my father said. "I thought it was pretty bad myself."